No one has worked harder than Secretary Kerry on this issue. But at the same time, when we hear very serious and legitimate concerns on the part of the Prime Minister, we take those into consideration.
We have to put this in the context of the world at large, and I just fear that 2014 could be a year of utter disaster in the region.
John McCain and Lindsey Graham, the two senators and two critics of the administration's Middle East negotiations, popping up in Israel today to bolster Prime Minister Netanyahu. Perhaps just coincidentally, as John Kerry is there on his latest round of diplomacy. Kerry met with the senators and separately with Netanyahu earlier today and is now in the West Bank meeting with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, as you see there. Joining me now is former California Congresswoman Jane Harman, President and CEO at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and Nicholas Burns, former U.S. Ambassador to NATO and State Department spokesman. Let me go to you first, Nick. If you were the spokesman of the State Department and the Secretary of State was on his second visit in 2 weeks to Jerusalem and the West Bank trying to hold together these peace talks and come up with a framework agreement, and your two most prominent critics from the Senate showed up at the same time to take the side of the Prime Minister of Israel, what would you think?
Well, it's obviously just politics in Washington. It's the way our foreign policy is. Senator McCain and Senator Graham made some good points in the interview they just gave, but I think Secretary Kerry did the right thing. This issue, as you know, Andrea, the Israeli-Palestinian issue, now in its 66th year without peace, is the core issue in the Middle East. And it's vital for the future of Israel and the Palestinians. So for the American Secretary of State to be spending a lot of time in it, making his 10th visit, it's reasonable. It cannot crowd out the other big issues in the Middle East. We've seen Iraq disintegrating over the last couple of days, tremendous violence there, the Iranian problem, the nuclear problems ahead of us. And of course, there's a Syrian civil war with 9 million Syrians inside and outside the country homeless. So the administration can't just focus on this problem, but it's a pretty important problem for the future of the region.
Now, some other critics, Nick and Jane, have been saying that the Secretary is focusing too much on a peripheral issue, and Jane should be focused on Syria, on a shooting war.
Well, I think we should be focused on Syria. It is important not just to celebrate, which we should celebrate, the fact that chemical weapons are being removed from the country, but there are over 100,000 people dead, most of them innocent civilians, in this long-lasting civil war, and our government should be paying more attention. As to John Kerry and this visit, I understand that Lindsey Graham has a tough primary, but gee whiz, guys, I think being the mouthpiece for the Prime Minister of Israel while our Secretary of State is there is not very smart. And Bibi Netanyahu has direct channels to John Kerry anytime he wants to use them, either public or private. And I think, frankly, what they did, however well-intended it might have been or however focused on their politics it might have been, should not have happened today.
Nick, let me